Hello, hello.
Please mute yourself. We will be starting the event very soon, within a minute.
A hearty evening to all the freshmen and sophomore out here. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the second day of this Hello World event. Talking about day one, we had an escape journey witnessing the top four domains in the CS field, starting from AI/ML, web development, Android development, and UI UX design. Moving a step forward, today we will be looking on to another set of trending domains like cloud computing, IoT, cybersecurity, AR, VR game development. By the end of the day, I bet you can pick out your preferred domain to seed your career with a fund. In the last resort, we will have one of our DSC team member to elaborate on 2021 DSC recruitments for team member position. Few instructions to be followed before starting your session. Kindly use your PCs to attend this webinar for better experience. And if you have any queries in the mid of the session, kindly post it in the chat box you see over there and we will have our team members to resort your queries. With no further delay, I would like to call upon Sanchita Sinha from third year CSE BDA to give a talk on SE/SDE domain.
Thank you, Mritula. Um, okay, hi. I am Sanchita Sinha from third year CSE BDA, here to talk to you about SE/SD and competitive programming. Now, this is more like a job role than a domain. So this will be one of the most important things when it comes to your placements, because most of the other domains that you saw yesterday or will be seeing today comes under this section. So STE here means software development engineer and SE is a software engineer. So first of all, I want to talk to you about two words that you will hear a lot in your life as a CSE student. They are coder and programmer. Now, if I were to ask you, what is the difference between the two terms? Most of you would probably say nothing, that they mean the same things, but it is actually not the case. Let me explain you with the help of an example. So, have you ever cooked out of a cookbook? Of course you have. Even if you sometimes burn water, you can probably follow a few instructions and prepare a basic meal, right? I agree the result might not be very pretty, but in the end, you will have something that is at the very least edible. So in this case, you're very much like a software developer. I mean, a coder. And a coder is someone who will write some code that compiles and runs, which does something that you want it to when it is given the right inputs. Now, if a coder is someone who blindly follows a recipe, a programmer is someone who is a reasonably competent cook. So they do sometimes read other people's recipes or follow other people's instruction, but they are not stuck on doing that all the time. Oftentimes, before preparing a meal, they will sit back and decide what they want to cook, what ingredients do they want to put in, and how they want to mix them all together. Now, this is what a programmer does. A programmer actively thinks about solutions for a problem from the different directions that they can think of before even starting writing the code. Now that you know the basic difference between a coder and a programmer, let's see what a software developer and a software engineer means. So if a programmer is a reasonably competent cook, the software developer is a professional chef. So not only they can cook to a very high standard, they will also I'm sorry. Okay, so not only will they cook to a very high standard, but they can also take a more creative and conceptual approach to what they're cooking, right? So they will also manage what the target market wants, how to plan out accordingly, and what instructions they want to give to the other cooks. So this is what a software developer also does. They will plan out everything, they will give instructions to the other programmers over there and carry out everything. A software engineer will do slightly different tasks. So the previous example that I gave as a head chef, that will mostly work in all cases. But sometimes when you're taking a larger facility like a hotel, you will have 5 different restaurants that comes under one kitchen. So you will have one head chef that will manage all these 5 restaurants, who has to maintain the same level of quality as that one head chef was doing for one restaurant, and has to basically manage each and everything over there. So a software engineer should be able to do each and everything that a software developer does, but with a different design philosophy, because they take a bigger picture into view. So even if there is a problem at hand, the developer will be focused on solving the immediate problem at hand, whereas the engineer will be interested in solving the problem at hand, plus minimizing the trade-offs to other parts of the system or architecture. Now, when you're developing something, when you're making a product, you need programming, right? And when you come into programming, you don't only learn how to code, but you also learn the art of thinking. And that is basically breaking your code into smaller chunks and then analyzing it and then coming to solutions for each part of it. Now, comparative programming is a sport which is held over the internet, where a programmer is a contestant over here. So we'll come back to this later when you have a better picture. Now, let's see how to get here, how to get to this journey. The first and foremost thing is a programming language. So before you start this journey, you need a programming language for you to code in. There are lots of programming languages, and I'm going to talk to you about 3 most popular languages chosen by students, like Java, Python, and C++. So students will usually use one of these languages as their kickstart tool. Now, I recommend C++ because it is a language that will help you build your foundations very nicely. So you can check these resources. This is a class 11 and 12 book by Sumita Arora. You must have heard of it in your school. This is one of the best books if you want to make your foundation strong. The next one is a book by Rima Thareja. This is for the intermediate level. So once you have grasped the basic concepts, you can jump to this book. It has tons of examples for you to, check them out. And this C++ primer, once you have solved at least 500 problems, you can read this book once to refine your knowledge. Now, if you're somebody who does not want to read books, then I will leave a few links in the chat box for you to discover. And since choosing a language is purely up to you, so I'll also add links to Python and Java. You can check those resources out, see what's best for you, and choose a particular language. Next, after you have chosen a language, you have the basics, you need somewhere to practice. That is where the platforms come in. There are a wide number of platforms available, coding platforms available, and they are CodeChef, LeetCode, HackerRank, and CodeForces. These are the top most popular platforms. There are many others you can choose from there. But see, HackerRank is mostly for beginners because It has lots and lots of questions from segregated by topics and the level of difficulty. So you can easily choose which topic you want, which level of difficulty, whether easy, medium, or difficult. Now, CodeChef and LeetCode are mostly preferred by or advised to people who have done programming before, who have some prior knowledge and some prior experience. I'll also leave a link to these, and you can try each one out, see what works best for you, and try solving problems each and every day once you are familiarized with it. Now, once you get into programming and once you want to become a software developer or a software engineer, you will sit for your placements, right, in the 4th year. So over there, your interview will mostly focus on two things, at least for the technical part of it. That is data structures and algorithms and problem solving. So let's look at data structures and algorithms. This will be one of the most important topics that you will learn in your college. So suppose I have this timetable over here. Now you can see that I have arranged this in the form of a grid, right? Now, if I want to access any one of these elements, like I want to check if I am free on Tuesday 3rd hour, I can easily find the intersection of this Tuesday and this 3rd hour, and I'll easily reach my destination. Now, if I wanted to, I could have stored my timetable in a different manner. Like I could have stored it in a list like this. In this case, if I want to access any timetable, any day's timetable, I would have to specifically pick out that day's list and check whether which periods I have or which subjects I don't have. But when you do this repeatedly, that is, if you want to check, suppose Tuesday's timetable, then your Wednesday's timetable, then Thursday's. So you have to take out one list, check, put it back again, check the other list. So this is a repeated process, which you can see will take a lot of time, especially if there are many such lists you have. So you can see just by arranging my timetable in a different format, how efficiently I can access my elements, how efficiently I can work on it. So this is what data structures deals with. When you have a lot of data, you need to know how to store them so that whenever you want to work on them, your work is simple and easy. It takes lesser amount of time to access my elements, lesser amount of space to store my elements. That is what data structure is all about. And you can find the links in the chat box. My friend will be sending it over there. And this was data structures. Algorithms. Algorithms is basically a list of steps that you follow in order to complete a particular task. For example, here I want to check which subject I have on whatever day in whichever period. I will follow a series of steps. That is, check the Tuesday's list and then the hour. So I'm following this list of steps each and every time I want to do something. So this is an algorithm. That is a sequence of steps. Now, the algorithms or the data structure that I showed here is very simple. But when you start learning, you'll come across many complex data structures and many complex algorithms. So this will take up a lot of time to grasp everything. So make sure that you take out enough time and learn these things properly. After data structures and algorithms, I said that we'll be talking about problem solving. That is where the art of thinking comes in. So as I said, that you need to be able to come up with solutions, not just any solution. You have to come up with a solution that is very quick, very easy to understand, not at all complex, but it is very quick and very efficient. So you can develop this skill by participating in coding competitions, because in coding competitions, you're given a particular amount of time in order to solve a question. So whenever you get a question, you'll always have that mindset that you need to solve this particular question in this time frame. Your question should not take more than, suppose, 1 second. Your question should not, your solution should not occupy a space more than, say, 1 MB. So in those cases, you will learn a lot about how to form your solutions. So that is where the coding competition part comes in. You can check these out, and there are lots of other coding competitions also. The platforms that I mentioned earlier, the coding platforms, over there you will also find some coding contests that they hold every month, or every few months or every few weeks. You can check those out as well. Now, this is a roadmap that I have here in case you want to come into this field, which I think most of you will want to, because this is one of the major things in CSE. So the first thing is language, that is Java, C++, Python, or any other language that you want to. First, you need to be clear with at least one of these. After that, you can build upon more complex languages, or more advanced languages rather. The next is data structures and algorithms, another important part. Now, projects. This will include at least one major project and one minor project. And the projects can be upon any domains that you saw yesterday or will see today. That doesn't matter. Whatever other domains that you like or you find fascinating, you can build a project on any of those. Core subjects. These are few subjects that you will have in your college course. And trust me when I say this, the classes can get very boring, but bear with me. Learn these subjects properly, understand the concepts. Don't just focus on memorizing each and everything that you see. Try to understand each and everything that's present over here in these subjects, because this will become very important when you sit for your placements. Comparative programming, that is art of thinking, as I said it. And this miscellaneous requires aptitude and reasoning. Obviously, your recruiter will want you to have some analytical skills. Also, when you're learning a programming language, try to not only learn or focus on the practical aspect, also focus on the theory, because that is also something that most people miss, but they don't realize how important it is to know your basics, know the theory very well. Now comes in your career. You will obviously wonder, what will you get out of this if you study for so long, practice so many questions? What will you get? That is, see, these are the many roles that an SD or SE job would lead to, and I'm sure you must have heard of most of these. You will hear application, front end, back end, full stack, all of these in yesterday's session. Then game development you'll see today, quality analyst, data scientist. I think you must have seen this yesterday. DevOps, you must have heard this word if you have attended Android study jams. So all of these will come under SDSE. Now, the salary part, this is the source is Upgrad. I've taken these data from there. The average salary as a fresher you can expect is 7 to 8 lakhs per annum. And this is the most basic. I'm not even going to the higher end companies. This is the most average companies that would offer you. Experience of 5 to 9 years would get you 17 LPA, and after that up to 22 or more. Now, one thing that you need to know, that your salary would depend on a lot of factors. First of all, location. That is very important, because Hyderabad, Chennai, and Bangalore at the moment will give you the highest packages, whereas if you go to other places, other cities, you might not get as many opportunities or as many companies, high-end companies. Like Hyderabad has people, warehouses and headquarters from Google and Microsoft and all these things. After your location comes organization, obviously the big companies. Expedia, Flipkart, Microsoft, Intel, Amazon, Google, PayPal, OE Rooms, all of these give very high packages to software developers. Also, Don't worry about opportunities being not present, because trust me when I say this, everything is going digital now. So there will always be need for software developers and software engineers. You just have to be well equipped. By well equipped means proper skills, proper projects. Don't mug up things. Practice, practice, and practice, and make good projects. Like, you can start from the very basics first, but then try to build up on them. So that was all from my side. If you have any questions, kindly drop that in the chat box. Our team will resolve it. And if they don't worry, I'll come back after the session is over and solve those questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanchita. That was an enlightening and illuminating session. Next, we have Aditya B from 3rd year and Harikrishnan from 2nd year CSE department to throw light upon the cloud computing domain.
Sorry, I was muted. One and all present here. Very good morning to one and all present here. I am B. Aditya from SRM Institute of Science and Technology. Here, along with Harikrishnan, is going to give you a deep insight into the topic of cloud computing. So I'm damn sure that all of you over here have heard a lot about these buzzwords. So you people are so much confused where to start and which domain you have to select. So this Hello World event is mainly for you people. So I'm going to give you a deep insight on the very common buzzword, that is cloud computing. So so the contents, what we are going to see today is that we are going to start with the introduction. This introduction will give you a deep dive into the domain, and then we'll give you the resources, education, and how to get started, etc. Then we'll give you the resources and tools from where you can learn a lot about this domain, and then various tools will be offered for practice, and then career. So after all of these, one important thing is a career. So we'll talk about the career, mainly the benefits, roles, salaries, etc. So what is cloud computing? Cloud computing is the on-demand availability of cloud computer systems resources, especially data storage and computing power, without direct active management by the users. So this term is generally used to describe data centers available to many users over the internet. The availability of high-speed capability networks and low-cost computers and storage devices, as well as the widespread adoption of hardware visualization, service orientation, architecture, and automatic and utility computing has led to the growth in cloud computing. So all these buzzwords are not a new field. They have done a lot of research, and a lot of research papers have been done on this field. But now it is gaining popularity only because of the high-speed computing and high power that we get today. So that is why these fields are seen as important field which provide high-paying jobs. So features of cloud computing. So these are some of the features of cloud computing. The first one is resource pooling. The second is on-demand self-service. The third is easy maintenance. There is no cost of maintenance or nothing required for maintenance, and there is large network access. The availability, there are a lot of web services available. Then automatic systems. Then it is very economical. That is, the cost models are very economical. Then security, they are maintained by the web services itself, and they often provide very high security. And then they are all mostly pay-as-you-go services. And then it is a message service. That is, the amount you pay only for what you use, not for the resource that you allocate. Second, now it is a type of cloud services. There are like 4 types of cloud services. One is IaaS, the second one is PaaS, and then there comes the serverless computing, and then is SaaS. So what is IaaS? Infrastructure as a service. The most basic category of cloud computing services is this. With IaaS, you rent IT infrastructure, servers and mainly the servers and virtual machines and storage. Then from you rent this from cloud service providers on a pay-as-you-go basis. Then you have this platform as a service, PaaS. Platform as a service refers to cloud computing services that supply on-demand environment for developing, testing, delivering, and managing software applications. Then you have PaaS, which is designed to make it easier for developers to quickly create web or mobile apps without worrying about the setting up or managing the underlying infrastructure of the servers, storage, network, and databases needed for development. Then you have what is serverless computing. Overlapping with PaaS, serverless computing focuses on building app functionality without spending time continually managing the servers and infrastructure required to do so. The cloud providers handle the setup, capacity, planning, and server management for you. Serverless architectures are highly scalable and event-driven, only using resources when a specific function or a trigger occurs, mainly your cloud functions. Then you have software as a service. Software as a service is a method for delivering software applications over the internet on demand and typically on subscription basis. Most of you have heard of this. With SaaS, cloud providers host and manage the software applications, underlying infrastructure, and handle any maintenance like software upgrades and security patching. Then users connect to this application over the internet, usually with a web browser on their phone, tablet, or PC, mainly hosting of your websites. Then where is cloud computing is used? You have seen types of cloud computing, functionalities, etc. Now we will see where this is used. You can see the picture over here. Cloud computing, SaaS type of service is used in communication, CRM, ERP services, email, games, etc. Then you have PaaS, web applications, development, database, etc. is where this type of service is used. Then you have server storage, network security, system management, etc. Then uses of cloud computing. This is a brief usage of cloud computing. It is used for creating cloud native applications, store backup and recover data, stream audio and video, deliver software on demand, test and build applications, analyze data, and embed intelligence. Benefits of cloud computing. It is the first benefit is cost. Cloud computing eliminates the capital expense of buying hardware and software and setting up and running on-site data centers, the racks of the server, the round-the-clock electricity for power and cooling, the IT expert for managing the infrastructure. It all adds up fast and thus reduces the cost. Speed. Most cloud computing services are provided self-service and on demand. So even vast amount of computing resource can be provisioned in minutes, typically with just a few mouse clicks, giving business a lot of flexibility and taking the pressure off capacity planning. Global scale. The benefits of cloud computing services include the ability to scale elasticity. In cloud speak, that means delivering the right amount of IT resources, for example, more or less computing power, storage, bandwidth, right when it is needed, and from the right geographic location. Then is your productivity. On-site data centers typically require a lot of racking and stacking, hardware setup, software patching, and other time-consuming IT management chores. Cloud computing removes the need for many of these tasks, so IT teams can spend time and achieve more important business goals. Then you have performance. The biggest cloud computing services run on worldwide networks of secure data centers, which are regularly upgraded to latest generation of fast and efficient computing hardware. This offers several benefits over a single corporate data center, including reduced network latency for application and greater economics of scale. Reliability. Cloud computing services make data backup, disaster recovery, and business continuity easier and less expensive because data can be mirrored at multiple redundant sites on the cloud and providers network. Then you have security. Many cloud providers offer a broad set of policies, technologies, and controls that strengthen your security posture overall, helping protect your data, apps, and infrastructure from potential threats. So how do we get started? So now we have seen all this. Now, where do you start to learn cloud computing? This will be briefly explained by my co-host, Mr. Harish.
Thank you, Aditya, for a wonderful introduction about cloud computing and some of the features. Now, how to get started. So, starting with some of the basic terms and commands like virtualizations, which you get it up in the like allocating some resources for a server, which is something kind of a disk partition in your PC. And next is web services and API, where you will learn about this thing in your backend development in web development, where you use a API to get the data from a globally server. Then next is server, like we manage the things of like database and reading the data and writing up the data and more operation like that. And SSH or RDP is like when you create a virtual machine, you would connect with it, your PC. If you are using Linux, you would connect it with using the SSH method. If you are using Windows, then you would use RDP, remote protocol. Then network design is something like LAN WAN, which you're studying in your in your higher school. Then Linux commands. This is the most important one. Um, like you would Linux command is used to manage up the server. You would write a shell scripting with this command. So this whenever you want to shut down a server, you won't wait it up. The Linux command, that shell, would do it up for you. So you have to learn the Linux command basic necessary. And disk allocation, which is when you are using the compute, when you're using the resources of your organization, you have to disk allocate for various things. And these commands such more and like that. Then programming languages. In cloud computing, you don't need much like of web development. Like web developer used to learn more programming languages, but not this domain. So here we have to know the languages such as XML, and then as R language, then Python. These two languages you have learned in data science, if you proceed in data science, and this would be much useful here also. And they would help to in SQL like queries, like select this table from this database. They would use them. And Golang is the modern language which would rule in this era in the cloud computing. Then Java is used to manage up the server and do the operation in a fast time. And next is JS. In backend development, you would have learned about Node.js, where the JavaScript is used to manage up the server side, and much more. And then after you learned up the commands and programming languages, you have to choose a cloud service provider. Like it has shown above, IBM Cloud, DigitalOcean, etc. And Hadoop is the best one. You can try it out. I will give the resources of all those things in the group chat. Then top three cloud provider is AWS, GCP, Azure. And most of the students started cloud computing in these three things only. Then tools. These are some tools. You can use it up. And Ansible, which you would learn from the Red Hat. And Google Cloud Deployment Manager as a simple GUI. You can start using the tools of. You can start with a Google Cloud Deployment Manager. This is easy. And then the resources part. I share the link in the chat box. You can check it out. So if you want to take notes, you can take a screenshot of this thing. And to learn Microsoft Azure, there's a several YouTube channel, and these are my top recommendations. And you can learn it from a documentation as well too, to get a clear idea about it. And Microsoft Learn is a program which is given by the Microsoft, like to give a account with a free $200 credits. You can start with it up. And then is AWS. If you're a book lover, you can read it up in AWS in action. You can get it in Amazon or in some Telegram pirated websites. And then there's AWS, the complete introduction Udemy course, which is kind of full of theory things, and you can learn it up. Then AWS startup, if you have some startup and you need a cloud server, then you can you have an idea about using AWS, then you can go to the free code camp and check it out. Then as well as the documentation too. Next is GCP. Um, GCP is the same as well. Developer Student Club organizes 30 days of Google Cloud in every year during the October-November month. You can attend it as session up. They would start with a basic thing, basic fundamentals of a Google cloud platform, and they would end it up with using the machine learning models in your server. And next is the Pluralsight course. They are offering the free resources like YouTube, like videos about Google Cloud. You can use that Pluralsight too in AWS. Then Quick Labs. Quick Labs is the same as you same like and they would give a hands-on session in GCP. With the starting like 200 credits free for with the starting of it, and Coursera Architecting with Google Compute Engine. This course you would do it after the 30 days of Google Cloud event. If you finish the Google Cloud 30 days event, then you get a Google Cloud Readiness program from it. And next, Aditya, we would continue about the career. Aditya, you are muted.
So now that you have seen about the tools, resources, and then functionalities of cloud, etc., then what is the important thing? That is your career. So benefits. Since 2011, the demand for public cloud services has grown more than 20%, clearly indicating how cloud computing has become an important IT service. According to International Data Corporation, cloud computing will be responsible for generation of nearly 14 million jobs between 2011 to 15. This shows that there are many opportunities to pursue and make a career in cloud computing. Then they provide competitive salaries. As the industry continues to grow, cloud computing skills are highly sought after by employers. This high demand has resulted in a large skill gap, meaning roles in cloud computing also have impressively high salaries. Then it is a growing sector. The sector is growing rapidly with companies spending more on cloud computing each year. Experts predict that global spending on cloud computing will grow from $229 billion in 2019 to nearly $500 billion in 2020. So some of the common roles that you will get if you learn cloud computing are infrastructure engineer, and then you have software developer, then comes software consultant, and then system architect, technical support, etc. Then skills and experience. In order to be able to work with the field of cloud computing, certain kinds of exposure or experience is required, especially in one of the bigger cloud computing service providers. Even experience with virtualization technology such as VMware or running servers, infrastructure, etc., can also be fruitful. Knowledge of a particular cloud service can also be helpful. Apart from professional qualification in some of these fields, as follows, will also be helpful. Namely, business skills, financial skills, technical skills, enterprise architecture and business management, project management skills, data integration and analytical skills, mobile app development and knowledge, security protocol knowledge, computing skills, knowledge of Linux operating systems, Python, SAS, programming, Ajax, Puppet, shell scripting, and Perl. And then teamwork and problem solving skills are a necessity. Then salary trends. So here is the salary trends for different roles. For cloud engineer, it is about 11,73,000, and then the skills that are required is Java, Red Hat, Linux, Oracle, SQL, Ruby, AWS, Python, Puppet, JSON, Cloud, Azure, and Microsoft Azure. And then for cloud or Azure architect, the skills are like AWS, Cloud Azure, Docker, Jenkins, Selenium, Kubernetes, Puppet, Bluemix, etc. And the median salary is 13 lakh and 40,000. And for DevOps engineer, skills is Python, Django, Ansible, Docker, SQL, web services, Git, Puppet, Design, Pattern, Jenkins, etc. And the median salary is about 12 lakh 95,000 rupees. And then for Azure or AWS consultant, skills are AWS, Cloud Azure, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, and then ASP.NET, MVC, Web API, JavaScript, etc. And the salary is about 9,27,000. And then experience the salary comparison for 0 to 3 years, you get about 12 lakh and 41,000 rupees, and for 4 to 6 years of experience, you get about 17 lakhs to 19 lakhs. So thank you for being so active in this event and attending this and giving me a chance to present in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya and Harikrishnan. That was indeed interviewing. Moving ahead, we have Pranav Mahalingam and Aditya B from third year CSE to give a talk on Internet of Things.
So, hi everybody. So let's not waste time. Just let's go into the topic. So today we'll be seeing what IoT is. So IoT is nothing but Internet of Things, as its abbreviation means. So the Internet of Things is nothing but any particular object. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah. So first, let me introduce myself. I am Pranav, an IoT enthusiast, and I'm also a YouTuber. I am also a game character designer and a tech lover. And I'm also having Aditya with me as my colleague, who will be taking this session with us. So I hand over to Aditya.
So as told earlier, IoT is also one of the important buzzword today. So what is IoT? The Internet of Things refers to a system of interrelated, internet connected objects that are able to collect and transfer data over a wireless network without human intervention.
So yeah, to add to Aditya's point, as I was like starting mentioning before. So for example, let us take our own cycles and even our phones. Actually, our phones is also now considered as an IoT device. We have a lot of things around us, which is now an IoT device. For example, we have Google Home, Alexa, and also we have some CCTV cameras which are IoT connected. That is, it is connected to internet. So like nowadays, even cycles are enabled. Like we have smart cycles in Chennai. So you can see that you can scan the QR code, and once you are done with cycling to a particular location, you can drop it off and also pay your money through the same IoT device. So this is just a field of computer science where it is collaborating with electronics around us, and we will be involving internet technology, that is our networking into it. So this is just a collaboration of multiple domains.
So now we have seen what is IoT. Now we will get to know what is the requirement of IoT. It makes everyday objects smart. It provides improved process efficiency, asset utilization, and productivity. It reduces operating cost, and then it introduces remote working options. And now we will see where and how is IoT used. Pranav will continue from here.
So yeah, thank you, Aditya. So IoT can be used in any applications. So recently you would have seen that we are using IoT in cars, that is our MG Hector. So it is one of the major examples where IoT is being used. So what is the main use of the main application behind IoT is use of sensors. So sensors are nothing but an electronic component which reads a particular value and it returns a particular value. So with this sensors, we will be able to interact with the outer world. So a computer will be able to interact with the outer world, and also we will be having network. So it is one of the major point which has to be noted in the field of IoT. Without network or any particular wireless mode of connections, we won't be able to make an IoT device. So yeah, coming to the major components of IoT. Yeah, as said before, the sensors are the most important parts of IoT device. So we have a lot of sensors. Say for if you're having your car reverse parking, you have this sensor called the IR sensor. If you want to check a temperature, that is nowadays in COVID period, people are checking their temperatures while entering into any particular public spaces. So it is nothing but it is also the same thermal sensors or the IR sensors which is being used. We also have some sensors like motion detectors. So that is also based on IR, but we have those sensors for based on motion sensors. We have energy meter sensors, which will be sensing the energy or the voltage which will be which is being sent out to a particular electronic device. We have gyroscopes, which are being used in our phones itself. So if we are rotating to any particular axis, it is having it's showing that the phone is in this position. It is in the landscape mode or the portrait mode. So this is the sensors which we'll be using in the IoT domain. Next comes the network. So network is one of the most important part of IoT. So network nowadays is like in a very high upcoming scale. That is, we are having 5G which is coming up. We are also having some kinds of networks and some kinds of wireless mode of communications like radio frequency, or also we are having this new concept called LoRa, where we can communicate up to 10 kilometers without the use of any kind of SIMs or any particular devices with that particular LoRa chip alone. So finally comes the user. So what is the use of having such IoT devices and sensors without having a user? So user is also considered one of the major component of an IoT. So now Aditya will be describing about the job opportunities.
Now that you have seen what is IoT, what are the components of IoT, now we will see why do we have to learn IoT? In the future, what are job opportunities? So you can see over here, we have given you a pie chart showing how is the job opportunities and the average salary according to different places around the world. So now for Washington DC, it is about $123,000, and for San Francisco, it is about $145,000, and Chicago it is $114,000, and for Los Angeles it is about $128,000. And the common roles are professional sensors and actuators, internet spine, and then safety engineering, and finally comes the embedded programs engineer. Pranav, you're muted.
Yeah, am I audible? Yeah, to add up to Aditya's points, so I would like to express what in the internet spine is. So internet spine is nothing but it's a group of people. So they are considered as the lifeline of IoT. So they are mainly hired in companies like Cisco, where IoT is used as a subject to everyday. Like IoT is used as the most common part there, where it is dealing with the network security, network handling, network routing. And these people are actually mostly mathematicians and also engineers who are very good at IoT. So it is one of the major jobs which is offered at Cisco. So next we'll be seeing about the future of IoT. So as per the future of IoT, it is like considered post 2020, there will be more connected devices than the people in the earth. So for this, we have a small representation graph. So here you can see that in 2003, it was around very, a very least number of devices which were as IoT devices. So all these actually, as per saying, it is like around one device was a person had just one IoT device connected. So it was nothing but his computer or his laptop. So then it was the complete overall population of the world was around 6.3 billion. So this 6.3 billion people where only one IoT device was with every person. So later in 2010, when there were a lot of improvements in the field of IoT, we had around two devices. That is, a person had around two devices. One was his mobile phone, his his laptop, and the other was his smart wearables. So smart wearables was mostly introduced in the year 2010. So we had our first Galaxy smartwatch from Samsung. So this is the period where the connected devices were rose around 12.5 billion and the population was 6.8 billion. So next, further moving to 2015, we had around 25 billion people. 25 billion IoT devices, for which 7.2 billion people were the population. So now what happened was this, people started more involving and investing into IoT in this time. So this particular 2015 was considered a more important period. So we had around 4 to 5 devices per person. So a person carried, like, he had his laptop, mobile phones, a smartwatch, he had his smart ring, he had also smart wallets. All these new technology innovations were brought out in 2015. Next came in 2020, that is the last year, we had around 50 billion IoT devices. It is research, it says that we had around 50 billion IoT devices, and for which a person had around 10 IoT devices. So the count of IoT devices per person was continuously increasing. So which already is now currently the population as per 2020 was around 7.6 billion people. So for which the population which that is the population of the IoT connected devices was IoT population connected devices was around 50 billion. So here now we will be seeing about the top 10 IoT companies over here. Sorry, top IoT companies. So there, some of them are Cooler Screens, Farmers Fridge, Simply Safe, Inspire, Innovo, Type, Exchange Security, Samsara, ARMs, and Clearblade. Along with which we have Google, Amazon, Apple, which are also having their IoT segment. That is, they are having their IoT domain division separately. So about Farmers Fridge, it is one of the most one of the notable IoT companies where they had like intelligent systems where the farmers crops are managed accordingly. That is, the storage bin is storages are accordingly managed, and it is like it provides the proper temperature for a storage, and it frequently checks the temperature of each particular storage box where the storages of the farmers, like say like the vegetables are kept over. So it also monitors whether the vegetables are in a proper state or it is spoiled. So this was one of the major places where IoT is played in IoT's technology is used in agriculture. So now, so you guys would be like fascinated. You will be checking out what is IoT, where will you get, how to learn about IoT. So these are some basic IoT tools for a beginner. So we will be starting always with the basic hardware. So these are all hardwares with IoT, which is related to IoT. So the first is actually we can start with Arduino. So Arduino is a set of microprocessors. So it is actually a development board microprocessor. So it is used for major projects in schools, colleges, and even in some major industrial places, they use the Arduino chip for some basic functionalities. And this is Arduino is completely, it works on the C++ programming platform. Then comes Espressif board, that is ESP boards. So this ESP boards are smaller sizes of Arduino. They are also a microcontroller. The major advantage of these boards are they have inbuilt Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections. So we are able to even communicate with our homes, and we can even connect it to our internet and send the data accordingly. And we can also view it in our mobile phones using this ESP boards. So these boards are also, you can program it using even C, C++ and Java. So next comes Raspberry Pi. So Raspberry Pi is a microcomputer. It is actually a credit card size computer. So this computer has a major craze all over the world. So you can also check out in your internet, you can just Google it out what a Raspberry Pi is. So it is just a small computer which is having the capability to run Windows 10 also. So you can also run basic games. You can even have your personalized computer. You can have a portable computer. You can make your own computer. So these are some of the functions of Raspberry Pi. But a Raspberry Pi is majorly used for the IoT purpose. So you can create your own Alexa device, Google Assistant, or even you can automate your home using the Raspberry Pi. You can also automate it using Arduino and ESP boards, but the Raspberry Pi will be more flexible, and you can even like control your home from anywhere from the world. So these are like the major advantages of Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi is based on Python platform. So you can program it using Python. That is, you can program your codes and run your codes using Python. You can also do it using Java, C, C++, or even you can use, and also Raspberry Pi is used for major machine learning applications. That is when you want to see something in action. Say now, recently you can see COVID monitoring systems. That is like, if you're wearing a mask, only you can enter a particular space. So this particular task alone, you can like connect your Raspberry Pi with a computer and run your machine learning code in it. So once you run it, the camera will check whether you are wearing a mask. Only then it will give you a beeping kind of sound, and immediately you can just proceed. So it is reducing the contact with human. So it is one of the major applications used, and the Raspberry Pi is used for major applications. We also have industrial versions of Raspberry Pi, and also some like it is industrial grades, but you have a lot of versions in Raspberry Pi. So next, you can, once you have like a good, you're like thorough with these particular kinds of boards, like you know how to use them, you know what a GPIO pin and how the GPIO pins can be used, then you can proceed with the other industrial boards like Intel Compute Sticks, and you have NVIDIA Jetson Nano, which is a good board for machine learning and AI, where it is implemented in robots and stuff. And you can also use some Adafruit microcontrollers. So these Adafruit is a major company which is providing all the sensors for all the three boards, that is Arduino, ESP, and Raspberry Pi. So next we will be moving into the software part. So softwares, what all softwares must you know, and what are the programming languages you must know. So you must have heard my seniors saying that programming language is the main part. So as per a computer engineering student, so the programming language is your skeleton. So the programming language is always playing the major role. So here are some programs that will be required for learning IoT based applications. So the major program will be a Python, C, C++, and Java. You can also learn R, Perl, etc. So you can implement the same in the IoT devices. So next will be the database softwares. So it is about the cloud, which as I said in the starting itself, IoT is a domain where you will be involving multiple domains. Say first was computer science, pure computer science. Next comes cloud computing. Next comes networking, and finally it comes into the electronics. That is your EC part. So where you have in the database part, you must know a basic cloud, that is database software like MongoDB or SQL. Later, you must also know some basic networking concepts. So you must know what an IP address is, what is a MAC address, what is a TCP connection, what is an IP connection. So for that, you will be using some basic softwares like Wireshark, and for connecting with the remotely with the devices, you will be using some PuTTY, the application named PuTTY. You will also be using SSH client and server based connection applications like Bitwise SSH. So these are some few examples of the softwares. Also, the fourth and the final part which you have to know about, like what is the development tools and how to go about in IoT is basic electronics. So you must have learned basic electronics in your class 12, which is well and good and more than enough for learning IoT. So do know what a resistor can do know what you can do with an LED, do know what you can you do with a switch, etc. So then it comes to the logical and reasoning skills. So this skills will be helping you program easier, and you will know how to map things accordingly. Like say, you know how to connect the sensors and how to get the data out of it. And finally, it will be your craziness. So the more crazy you are, the more easily you can learn it. So these are the development tools which you will be using for IoT. So where do you start from? So always start from programming. So once you start, you know how to how to do a particular program, you know how to create applications from a program. So once you're thorough with a programming part, you can go into electronics, just some basic electronics, just know how to connect the GPIO pins, what to do when you're using an electronic component and what not to do. Then you can start with the hardware part, that is the microcontrollers, which is Arduino and ESP boards accordingly. And you can try out with any of the boards because both are almost the equal and same boards. That is, they are microcontrollers, so you can implement any kind of programming with it. Then once you're like thorough with your Arduino boards, you can get into Raspberry Pi and other advanced industrial board. But you are also, if you are capable enough, you can start with Raspberry Pi. So once if you are able to do a Raspberry Pi, like you know how to operate a Raspberry Pi board, then it will be also easy for you to learn and work out in microcontroller boards. So it is not that you have to go this path only, you can also try your own paths. So with this, we are coming to the end of the session. So I'll also send you some links in the chat box where you can. It's the online courses and the free. There's also a free course offered from Cisco. So these are some basic courses where you can get it from. Get to know more about IoT, and you can also learn basics of the IoT. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Pranav and Aditya. We have got more gem from you this time. As the world is increasingly interconnected, everyone shares the responsibility of security in cyberspace. Now we have Zoya Ahmed and Shubham Giri from third year CSE to give a talk on cybersecurity.
So, a very good evening to all the first years here and the second years. So, without much further ado, let's quickly delve into the cybersecurity domain. So, it is primarily all the technologies, processes, and the people working together to protect the internet connected devices as well as the systems and data that sums up what is cybersecurity. And this data can be any kind of confidential information related to your bank accounts or maybe a company's secrets, anything which has to be kept private and only for authorized users. That is the data that we are looking forward to protecting through cybersecurity.
Yeah. So what is data basically? Data are the basically the like raw facts. They have nothing meaning. They're just numbers. Like if you have some bitcoins or any transaction, you get any number. It does not give any meaning, but it just gives some information which can be after decryption we will get. So data are the raw facts, raw figures which have no meanings, but the hackers need them very much because they can easily decrypt this data because data can be made transferred to information. Let's see what's transform information is basically. So yeah, information are the like processed data, because after every data you have to be processed, like the encoding codes, like you have to see the WhatsApp status or anything. After they get decoded, they become information. Information is a very much important thing for a hacker, because if you are a victim, the hacker needs some information first to attack you. He will get all the biodata, all the resources to attack you. So information is a very much important in this cybersecurity world.
Okay, so coming to the last part, which is security, it is often referred to as the CIA triad or the confidentiality, integrity, and availability triad. By confidentiality, we mean that the main purpose of cybersecurity is to protect the information and keep it private only for the authorized users. So it is often referred to as privacy. And by integrity, we mean that the information shouldn't be modified. And to get this, we use hashing techniques such as MDH5 to achieve this goal. And lastly, availability. By availability, we mean that the information should be available as and when required, and it shouldn't have been modified, and it should be available only for the people who are authorized for it.
Yeah. So now let's move to the threats that in which games in our cybersecurity world. Because there are many threats which are occurring in our world day-to-day life, in a single like if a normal human life. They're like you are doing any small work, many attacks are coming. Like they have different types of threats, like man of middle, DDoS attacks, password attacks, and phishing. Man in middle, like some there you are doing some transaction between you and your client, but some other third person is also checking out your transaction. Phishing, many school children get used to get caught in that tricks, because they just show some fake website that is similar to that Facebook, and they put all the credentials there. So these are the many threats which are occurring in our day-to-day life. So let's see what are the basically in our life, like social engineering is one of the main starting part.
Okay. So coming to social engineering, it is one of the most common threats that people are vulnerable to, and this is one of the easiest ways that you can get conned. So social engineering is gathering information from humans, where the attackers prepare their ground initially, and then they play their victims in order to gain confidential information, secret data, etc. Out of which there are many social engineering techniques with which the attackers can gain information, but out of which phishing, baiting, and information gathering is one of the most common ones that are prevalent in today's times. So let's look into phishing. It is a fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information or data. This can be done via telephones, mails, websites, etc., where a person is posing to be genuine, but actually it is an attacker trying to steal your information.
Yeah. So let's move to the information gathering part. Information gathering is a very important thing for a hacker, which he is doing in his life. Like if you are going, if you are date with a friend, anyone who hang out, he will just ask, "Hey, what's your birthday date?" He will say, "My birthday date is this." If he will ask, "So what's your like favorite hobby? What you do?" He will say normally as his friend. But did you notice he asks your birthday date and your hobbies? But when you make a Google account in Gmail, they ask your birthday and hobbies and your birth location. So these things he is gathering from a small stock conversation. So you are a daily a victim of information gathering part, because information gathering is a very much important process in which the victim is easily giving all his information, crucial passwords. Many put their common password. These things, everything is going to information gathering process. And for like I will say, if you want to check how this works, like we have some websites like uh, whois.com, in which you can put your IP address. Then you will see all your data, begin from where the network is going to connection, where how it is, from which router you are taking, all the MAC, everything it will say. And for one good website you may have not know, like there is a website called spokeo.com, in which that if you go to spokeo.com, you will ask any name, any email address, or any phone number. You just type anyone's email number, then it will give all the data of that person wherever the email ID is being used to all the 250, 100, 300 social media accounts. Yeah, they ask some about handsome. They ask, it's a paid service. They will ask some amount, but you will get all the information about the person. So these are the process of the information gathering. So this is a very major point. Yeah, let's see another thing.
Okay, so coming to the other attacks which are common. So they are malware, ransomware, and virus attacks, out of which the malware attack is one of the most common ones and it is the most vulnerable one. So malware is a catch-all term for any kind of malicious software which is designed to exploit, harm any programmable device or system and leak your data and cause security breaches.
Yeah, and similarly the ransomware also. Ransomware are they mainly are the big attacks. They attack in big companies and big banks basically in other countries. From last 2 3 years it's happening. They just block the system and they will ask for a good amount, handsome amount of money to get unlock the system. So these are the attacks. They only attack in big companies or like in banks. They will full log the system. So ransomware is also very much big attacks nowadays going on. And about virus, virus you all know what's a virus is basically like they are the threads which are they are the files which they automatically work in the background in our system. They decrypt the codes in the background and they just like make it multiple and they like fully the system covered. The first virus I will say it was used in 90s which was named as creeper sword. It was used as like to get the to full um, take the full computer in your hand by a virus. So let's see other points like technology.
Okay, so coming to the part of technology, as we all know, the world is going digital. So cyber risks are inevitable, they are bound to happen. The only way that we can prevent ourselves from getting under these attacks is to protect ourselves by taking preventive measures, which will help us to protect, detect, and react against these cybersecurity risks. So, in all, cybersecurity refers to a body of technology, processes, and practices which are designed solely for the devices and programs from attack, damage, and unauthorized access.
Yes. So about this antivirus you have learned from the like beginning of your childhood. Like your parents used to say, ki, like put antivirus in a system to protect you. Yes, antivirus thing just they want to assure that you are from virus free from their system because there are many attacks are going in our day-to-day life. But antivirus want to assure themselves that we will protect your system. But still, I will say Linux and Mac is much better than Windows for virus attacks. They don't get virus easily in the system, but nowadays, Windows Defender updated version is very much like much better than the antivirus you pay for 1,000 to 2,000 rupees because the Defender is so much like updated now. This Windows thing that it does not allow any third party or any resources that contains a small virus or small zip file also from the Chrome. So I'm using it, so it's very much pretty good, and I'm liking it. So I will prepare to expound other points like firewall access.
Yeah. Now, coming to the firewall, is basically a network security device that monitors and filters the traffic which is coming in your system as well as the outgoing traffic according to the individual's security policies. It is of three types: packet fillers, stateful inspection, and proxy server firewalls. So, in this particular software, each and every message that is entering and leaving the internet goes through this firewall for to be examined for security measures, and if it does not clear the security measures, that information is not carried into the network and it is left there and then.
Yeah. So let's move to the fundamentals of cybersecurity. So network security, I will say first. Network security is a they are the like they are protect the network traffic of the system. They check the incoming and the outgoing connections to coming to a company because they are in much more high demand in the company. Like the company wants to know okay, which in connection has to be coming in our server or which not because there are thousands of connections going all over internet. So the network security, like it filters it network, it traffics the networks which to be allowed, which not to be allowed. DLP is like data loss prevention, which is like live thing, like you are doing something work on your system and suddenly something happen and your like work get lost. So these has to be prohibited. And cloud security, our every data is going as saved in cloud because there are many companies like Amazon, our Google Drive. These all are saved in like cloud only. So clouds has to be saved because our every data is going to be there only. IDS and IPS system. These are the systems like they just regularly check where the cyber attacks are going on. Like if you do any small DDoS attack in your area, they will automatically get to know hostile. They will check if where the attacks are going, which who is doing. They are just like cyber cell police. And IM is just they authenticate the entire system. Like sometimes in your own system PC, some malware automatically generates if something happens. So they internally they check the system only first. Antivirus, I already told in the last slide. They just save, make assurance to you that they will save your PC. They work for the same as the encryption part. Okay.
Okay. So coming to the benefits of employing this technology, the major benefit is that it reduces the cost. There are huge losses incurred by the companies if they are under a cybersecurity attack. In 2020 alone, there was an attack summing up to 42 billion. So by employing cybersecurity technologies, you can save yourself from losing huge amount of money. The second point is that it reduces potential risks. So the companies and the individuals can save themselves from security breaches and getting their data leaked. And lastly, it increases agility. It means that during any cybersecurity attack, you can easily recover your data. So it provides a faster recovery time as compared to the other networks which do not apply cybersecurity.
Yeah. So let's move to what are the current trends. Current trends are basically like SDN. I'm talking defined networks. They are much more high in demand in the big companies because they have to define the networks which are coming or not. Focus on cloud security. Cloud security because for reducing the cyber breach, cyber security breach, we have to focus on the cloud security part because our many data are saved in the cloud only. iCloud many things. IoT. IoT, I will say like they are the platforms where the hackers are mainly using nowadays because they do DDoS attacks from IoT platforms only. Sorry. AI botnets. AI botnets are they are the latest weapons of the hackers. They are the botnets like they make self bots. Like you are in a Discord server, they will join as a member. They made themselves by a bot, self bot, and they will do commands in that server. So they will automatically hack the server easily. So and about vulnerability in Android and iOS. Yeah, our mobile devices are the very much vulnerable thing. The hackers first attack on these small things only also. So our mobile technology has to be upgraded for the security things. Let's see other things. Future.
Coming to the future, there are two major trends that one needs to look out for in the coming years in the field of cybersecurity. The first one is artificial intelligence. AI technology is being used for removing unwanted data and noise from the data, and for detecting and identifying the cyber attacks and preventing them as well. But it also has its drawbacks. Hackers are using AI technology for performing more sophisticated attacks, and people are easily getting caught up in that. And secondly, it's IoT. IoT is nowadays being used for safeguarding the connected networks and devices. And there are a few ways with which you can keep up with these current trends and the technologies which are being like employed in these fields. It is by following industry blogs, following the topics on social media, joining groups online and in person. You can join groups in Meetup where you can meet people with similar interests, similar knowledge, looking for more information on this particular domain. So you can go and join these groups. Then you can engage in tech forums. And lastly, subscribe to relevant e-newsletters which have all the information that you need to keep up with this particular technology.
Yeah, so let's now we will ask. So, what's the future in the cybersecurity domain? How to be like processed? How to be kick started? So yeah, career is very much it is very much high demand in other countries. Cybersecurity person, they want good cybersecurity person. They want recruited because there are many attacks are going in each day. 1,000 attacks a hacker is doing. So if you become a good cybersecurity person, your average salary will get around 7 to 8 lakhs minimum. So just think, there are many scope in the cybersecurity domain. You have to do masters for that. Only with the bachelor degrees you can't do. Yeah, with some good certifications you can get technology yourself. So let's see what the jobs you will get in this cybersecurity domain.
Yeah. There are a lot of jobs for if you want to pursue a career in cybersecurity, but out of all of them, these 6 ones are the highest paying jobs, and which have lucrative careers where you can always excel and get promoted and then always increase your pay. Out of all these 6, the most highest paying job is of a chief information security officer, where in this person oversees all the activities going on in a network, and providing details and instructions as to how to protect your network. So other job profiles are of a forensic computer analyst, an information security analyst, and a penetration tester, or an ethical hacker.
Yeah, so now how to get technology yourself? Like for these things, have to get some certifications like CEH. It's in India also. Like you have to pay a good amount of money, like around 10,000. You have to pay to get this certifications. So you can't get a small knowledge about hacking and you apply for certification. No, you have to get a full knowledge about the full ethical hacking things. Then you can apply for certification CEH. And about this CISSP, I will say if you have done this CISSP certification, it's a international certification. Then in Australia or America, you will get a job around $135,000 if you have these certifications. So there are many these important certifications that if you want to prove that yeah, I'm a hacker, so you have to get these first. Like CCNA, we have our Jufusia Plus. We have the American and computer companies which provide certifications to you. So you can apply to any of these and get certifications for like acknowledge yourself that I am a certified hacker. Okay, so let's wrap it up. That's all about the cybersecurity domain. Any doubts you are having, like what's the other factors we can have in it? You can ask me questions. Thank you. So with those certificates, we can officially hack into others' account. See, with those certificates, no. Yeah, official, it's illegal because if you are a ethical hacker, you have to do some ethics. You can't do illegal things because if you have a certificate, then you have to you have bound to with your rules and regulations. You can't do for any fun like Instagram hack or these things. You do in the back. If you get caught, then all your certification will be cancelled. So these things you have to be in mind. So before doing any attacks or anything, just keep in mind that you have a career also. So don't do for fun just a small things. Okay. Any other
I'll just
question?
add one more thing, that there are no proper degrees for a cybersecurity domain. So in order to pursue a career in that, you have to do these certifications, because if you have a valid certification from a renowned company or a renowned certification company, you will land up a job which is going to pay you as high as 10 to 15 lakhs on an average. And if you are a more experienced person, you can land up a job of as high as 40 lakhs. So like if you want to pursue a career, you have to do the certifications.
In Maria Enthusiast now in first year,
Yeah.
I want to be a hacker. I want to hack someone Instagram. These things. Keep it. It will be motivated. Any other questions? So we will move to other domains part.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zoya and Shubhamgiri. It was enlightening and informative. Virtual reality is the first step in a grand adventure into the landscape of imagination. Yes, you guessed it right. The AR/VR game development. The final domain we are going to see for this event, and for this we have Rahul Sharma and Pranav Mahalikam from 3rd year CSE department.
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm again back. So now we'll be seeing about AR, VR, and game development. So myself, Pranav, and we'll have Rahul, who's from Unity, who's a Unity developer working with Soma Reality currently. So he will be joining us soon. I guess he's having some network issues. I'm a game level designer, so I'll be taking the game development. So first, let's get to know what actually augmented reality is. So AR is nothing but a combination of real world scene objects by the user along with virtual scenes. That is basically we have things which are real but are not real. So it is layman description of augmented reality. So in AR systems, we can see computer generated objects and audio in our real world. Say I guess you guys will be seeing Snapchat or even Instagram. So you have also in your iPhones and other phones can now the recent camera versions they have something called AR. So where you can place a cartoon in a particular spot in your real world. So this is like basically interacting with the virtual objects. So the computers will be creating some basic computer generated objects and audio for the real world. So you can interact with it at the real time. So its ultimate goal is that you have an add-on advantage of vision and perception. That is, you can place things at a particular spot. You can measure things accordingly. Like recently, the IoT, the sensors which we have in iPad, where you can measure a place from one spot to the other. That is basically an practical application of AR. So we also have AR glasses like the Google Glass, the Microsoft HoloLens, where people can place virtual objects in and around their real world. So this is augmented reality. So next is virtual reality. So virtual reality is the place where we are limited to the real world and we completely get into a new world, that is the virtual world. So that is, it is not a real world, but it acts as if it's a real world. So the virtual world will be running through a simulator through the computer. So you can enter into the virtual world and interact with it easily. So that is what a virtual world does. So for virtual world, we use the virtual reality, we use the VR glasses. So from here, I guess Rahul will be taking it over. Yeah, Rahul. You're on mute, Rahul.
Yeah, first of all, I'm really sorry to be late, and let's start the session for AR, VR, and game development here. So, Pranav has been teaching you very well about virtual reality right now. So, as you know, virtual reality is about understanding a virtual environment with complex interaction of your hands and body movement. Like here, you can see in this video that photos that there is a person wearing VR headsets. There are two kinds of headsets here. The first one, the person with a white headset, you can see him there. He's having a Google-based VR headset. It's of 3DOF. That means 3 direction of freedom. So what do you get from 3 direction of freedom? It gives you a 3 direction of freedom, as in movement and rotation in X, Y, and Z angles. And the other person wearing another VR headset. The thing is that what you can't see in this photo is he is having 4 cameras added in his room, due to which his whole motion becomes 6 directional of direction freedom. That means he can even move in XYZ direction. Like he can move in his room and he can have a haptic feedback similar to how he is moving in the VR headset in the virtual world. What he is seeing here. So let's move on to the next slide. So what do you get from word game development? First of all, this thing, game development, is not only for the people who can code, it's also for people who are interested in arts and 3D design. So game development is something which is technical and also very non-technical with a standpoint of understanding. Here, video game development can be considered way to implement interactive elements in a form of software, so that it's very entertaining. When you talk about video game industry as a whole, it is one of the world's biggest entertainment industry. And when you go deep in understanding of video game development, there are certain softwares which are used. Every game is made up on that software, which is called a framework or a game engine. So there are 2 most important game engine which are publicly available, so that you guys can use them for free, and they are Unity and Unreal Engine. The best part for you to have experience with these 2 engines are that they are world's biggest game development producers. So like if you are a Unity developer, you might have heard of Clash of Clans. It's one of the world's greatest mobile video game. And when you have heard of Batman Arkham series or even PUBG, that's made on Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is very good for multiplayer based games, and you can have a very detailed Swift of programming there because they use C++. Now, learn one thing, that if you are going to game development, C++ and C# is the most important part here because that's what you need to work on. Let's go ahead. So AR, VR in game development. So we learned that game development is not only about technical knowledge, it's also about understanding of non-technical ideas and very art-based system like 3D design. Now, how do you implement that exact thing in augmented reality and virtual reality, something that is already very complex to understand? So the idea of an AR game is to provide a simple interactiveness and immerse the user in the AR scene. So what's an AR scene? As Pranav have explained you, AR scene is something which is augmenting a 3D world in your real world through your camera phone, and which you can see in your camera screen. So how would you interact with it? You can touch it in real world. So providing a simple interactiveness like tap and touch, that would be very interactive here because already the phone is taking lots of processing power here, and also that AR game are much fun when they are made for simple interactiveness like Pokemon Go. All you have to do is walk, look at a Pokemon, and throw your Pokeballs at it. Next, when you go ahead at VR-based game development, it's more of a simulation here, but focused on your movement-based controls. Like there's a game called Robo Recall, where you have to shoot the robots. So you have to move your hands, which will be acting as guns. You can touch a robot, you can hold a robot, you can push a robot, but you have to have a certain movement for that. And to provide a good interactiveness, here you can really be very focused with VR-based simulation systems or VR games. So let's go about limitations now. So when you go to the limitations of the VR game, the first thing you will be facing here is the VR should be made very with a very smooth motion sensitivity because it is really connected to your eyes, really close to your eyes. So if there is a lag, you can have motion sickness. In an AR game, there is not much limitations, but AR hasn't become that technologically progressed as compared to VR. It's still very young, and yeah, there's a lots of scope in it. Now you will be getting some very important stats that you should note by Pranav here.
Thank you, Rahul. Just a second, I am facing this. So now we look out into the career opportunities. So like Rahul said, we have AR, VR, game development, and AR and VR, and also game development in the career opportunities. So for career opportunities, it is divided into two parts. One is the technical or the programming skill based career opportunities, and the other one is the non-technical and art-based gaming opportunities. So it is not that only these particular AR, VR, and game development will be used only in developing a game. You are also the game developers and also AR, VR artists are also used in films. Like recently we had 2.2, which in Indian film industry, which had a lot of VFX in it. So there people were also used, the non-technical artists and even technical people were used for the giving a good graphic content inside the movie. So now coming into the technical and the programming aspect, we have job roles like game programmer, network programmer, engine programmer, rendering programmer, and shader programmer. So you can note that all these programmers require basic skills of C++, and C#. So and a renderer programmer and the shader programmer will be requiring C++ along with GLSO. So coming to the non-technical part, which I am into for the game developing, game level designing, animation, and even Photoshop, like graphic content designing. So this this is the place where not every people who's not very good at programming can get into. So you have job roles like 2D artists, 3D artists, animators, shader artists, etc. So for a 2D artist, you will be requiring Adobe softwares like Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Lightroom. For 3D softwares, you will be using 3D artist, that is 3 softwares like Autodesk, Maya, and Blender. So these 2 softwares are used even for animations. So animation and shader artists. So these softwares are very high graphic intense softwares. So you can learn these softwares anywhere in the in the online platforms, and also you have specified institutes, say like Image. You have Image Institute of Creative Education, and also you have an institute named as sorry, I just forgot the name. So next, when we move into the industrial giants, so these are the industry giants with AR, VR, and game development. So we have always in the top Apple, for which we are waiting for their Apple glasses to be released. Then we have Microsoft, which has already released their Microsoft HoloLens. Then we have Niantic. So you guys must have played this game called Pokemon Go. So these guys are the developers for the game, where AR is playing the major part in it. So we next have Nvidia, AMD, Oculus, HTC, Samsung. All these companies are also focusing on both AR and VR. So Oculus and HTC is mainly focusing on VR. So we have our VR headgears, which is mostly branded by Oculus and HTC. So next we will be coming into Alphabet, or the Google company. So it is the one which has released their Google Glasses. So it is a majorly known AR. So the major advantage is that it is just a small device which you can wear it on any particular glasses. Next we will be seeing some game development companies like Unity, Zero Game Studio, Electronic Arts, Nintendo, Ubisoft, Sony Entertainment, Activision Blizzard, which is at a very high hype, which is the Call of Duty Warzone. Next comes Epic Games. So you have our Fortnite into it. We have Gameloft, mobile game developers, Square Enix, Bungie.inc. So these industry giants are the ones who will be recruiting the game developers, AR, VR developers, and the pay scale is obviously very high when you are entering such companies. So now we will be seeing the future scope of game development. Yeah, as said by Rahul, we have AR and VR into the game development. So that is also one of the major impact. That is which is going to have a major impact. So virtual reality has a very high projected potential of growth. Then we have AR and VR, which on combination will be reaching around 15.5 billion euros by 2022. So it is very high, where people are investing very highly on AR and VR. I guess recently you would have seen in your YouTube ads that Snapchat has launched a AR system where you can like test out, or you can develop your own AR stuffs. So it is where Snapchat is also investing a lot on AR. So next, coming to the video game development market, we have a lot of games coming up. So recent was the Cyberpunk, so which had a very good storyline, and it